This week, Ubisoft reveals a major reorganisation complete with 6 game cancellations. Non-game apps made more money on mobile than game apps for the first time ever. Steam has slightly shifted its stance on AI, and our big topic of the week, is it game over for VR? Hello and welcome to the Game Business Show. This week, I'm going to be joined by 2 people, including investor, board member, business leader, and founder of the Curran games agency, Cassia Curran. She's an absolute expert in the worlds of VR and XR, and we're going to be discussing the situation in the VR market following Meta's decision to sort of pull away from it last week. I've also got a small interview with you on the subject with Andrew Eiche. He runs Owlchemy Labs. He's also going to be talking to us about this subject. They had 2 hit VR games, Job Simulator, it's almost 10 years old and sold 6 million copies, and Dimensional Double Shift, which launched last year. It's a free-to-play game that's had 1 million installs. And I'm going to hear his views on things. Now, Owlchemy are not an independent studio. They're actually owned by Google, which is interesting in itself. But before we get to those VR folks, we have a couple of stories for you. And the big one, the one that broke yesterday, it was all around Ubisoft. Ubisoft has cancelled 6 games currently in development. It's including the remake of the Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, which I was very much looking forward to. They also delayed 7 other games. It's all part of this major organizational, operational, and portfolio reset. They've conducted a thorough review of its content pipeline and decided to make all sorts of changes. It also is accelerating its cost reduction initiatives. It said it is now aiming to reduce its fixed cost by an additional 200 million euros over the next 2 years. That's going to be a lot of job losses there. They're also mandating a return to the office 5 days a week. That's part of the many changes that are going on. There's loads in this report. They've also laid out. Obviously, they closed 2 studios recently, including Halifax and Stockholm. They've also laid out how its creative houses are going to work. You may remember they've got creative houses. Vantage Studios is one of the creative houses. It has games like Assassin's Creed and Far Cry in there. Their Creative House 2, these are unnamed at the moment, is going to have The Division, Ghost Recon, and Splinter Cell in it. So it's going to focus on competitive and cooperative shooters. Creative House 3 will operate a roster of select, sharp live experiences. So that's For Honor, that's The Crew, that's Riders Republic, that's Skull and Bones, that's Brawlhalla. Creative House 4, which will focus on fantasy worlds and narrative-driven universes, including Beyond Good and Evil, which we're still waiting for, Anno, Might and Magic, Rayman, and Prince of Persia, which they say they're still committed to Prince of Persia despite cancelling that remake. A Creative House 3 will see Ubisoft try and reclaim its position in the casual and family games market with brands such as Just Dance and Uno. Supporting those creative houses is the Creative Network team, which will share studio expertise and provide co-development support, as well as a core services group, which will focus on technology, QA, localization, business planning, and more. Specific studios will fit into those various creative houses, while some of them will be assigned to the Creative Network team, so they'll support multiple houses. Yeah, it is quite a significant series of changes here. They want to reclaim its creative leadership and drive a sharp rebound following a turbulent few years of disappointing game launches and plummeting stock value. And that obviously led to the minority stake of one of these creative houses to Tencent. Obviously, the company yet to fully comment on layoffs. You wouldn't expect them to. They are a European organisation. After all, these things take a little bit of time. Yves Guillemot, he made some interesting comments about AAA. On the one hand, the AAA industry has become persistently more selective and competitive with rising development costs and greater challenges in creative brands. On the other hand, exceptional AAA games, when successful, have more financial potential than ever. We sort of saw that a little bit last year in the games industry. A lot of the more established IP did well, but there were some new IP breakouts as well, including Ark Raiders. Ubisoft actually insists they are still committed to new IP now. They have many of the games they closed. 4 of the titles they have 3 of the titles that have been cancelled are new IP. But the company said that, yes, it is more difficult to market and create new IPs than before, or to give additional time for projects that we think have great potential, but we need to make sure they will come with exceptional quality. So that's really the approach and the mindset that we've been following. This is what they said on the financial call they did. We still have 4 new IPs in development, including March of Giants, which they acquired from Amazon only a little while ago. And they believe they have 4 innovative new IPs that we can bring to market to a great level of success. This is very much, Ubisoft have been making cuts and trimming things constantly, closing a studio here, making a few cuts there, cancelling a title, all that sort of stuff for a while. For quite a few reasons. One, it's a very bloated organisation that makes a lot of stuff and not all of it was working. In fact, most of it wasn't working, including some of their big AAA games. This is them sort of trying to address that in a more significant way. They're talking about making $1 billion loss now on this in the next financial year. That's the result of one of the delayed games. One of the delayed games which analysts believe might have been the Assassin's Creed Black Flag remake has been delayed out of the financial year. It was due before the financial year. It hasn't been announced yet. That's been delayed. So there is sort of an expectation that there's going to be a big loss for Ubisoft in the next financial results. All of it is designed to set up the company correctly for the future. This is obviously a depressing story. It's a miserable story, but it kind of felt like it was needed with Ubisoft. It had become quite a bloated organization. It was doing lots and lots and lots of different things, and a lot of the stuff wasn't working. We always felt something like this was going to happen. Ubisoft sort of painting this as being the last major thing that it's been doing. It will still take place over 2 years. It will be a long process. But obviously it can be a very stressful time for the people at Ubisoft. I hope to talk to them soon. We do have a piece coming up with Ubisoft shortly around AI. They're using AI not to necessarily speed up game development. I guess they are a little bit, but mainly to add new features into some of their games. I imagine that's part of the creative services group. It's a big story. There's a lot going on at Ubisoft. It's been going on for a while. A lot of the stuff I was just talking about here has been in the works for well over a year. The creative houses repositioning has been part of that. But the cuts to those games, those studios, it's interesting they mentioned so many of their games in that creative houses list. Just shows how many titles they have going on. And you forget sometimes some of these titles like Uno and Anno, which was a big hit for them last year. But yes, lots going on at Ubisoft, and not a lot of it very happy. We will continue to cover this story throughout the year. Moving on, Sensor Tower, the data firm that specializes in mobile, they released their State of Mobile Games report yesterday and revealed that for the first time ever, consumers spent more money on non-game apps than they did on games on mobile. Now, there's a big reason for this is AI. So all those AI apps like ChatGPT, they saw a $3.5 billion increase in revenue during 2025. But it's not just AI. Movies and TV app revenue went up, social media revenue, utility app revenue, multimedia design software, all of that did very, very well. And that together drove a 21% growth in non-mobile game markets, $85.6 billion it generated. Games alone, still massive, delivered $81.8 billion. And in fact, that's an increase on 2025. But non-game apps are now nearly 3 times as big as they were 5 years ago. Technically, we don't care about non-game apps. It's just a bit of showing off, really. But how well did games do? Well, according to Sensor Tower, it's a bit of a mixed bag. So mobile game revenue grew by 1% to the 81.7 billion. But downloads dropped. It's down 7% to 50.4 billion downloads. It's the second consecutive year of a drop for game downloads. The number of hours spent on games is basically flat. I mean, it's barely up 1% to 445 billion hours spent gaming on mobile. Now, Sensor Tower's analysis says that as installs are falling, game growth is going to depend less on adding users and expanding your users and more on expanding lifetime value from existing players. So basically making more money out of the existing audiences. That's going to involve all sorts of things like live ops and ads to certain things. In terms of the games that did very well, strategy games was the biggest genre, driven by popular 4X games like Last War Survival and Whiteout Survival. Puzzle games are up, especially in Europe. Royal Match was the big one in Europe. And in Asia, the shooter market grew quite a bit, helped by the launch of the game Delta Force. Now, in terms of downloads, the number one game in the US was Block Blast, followed by Roblox. In terms of revenue, Monopoly Go was number one, followed by Royal Match, then Last War Survival. It just shows how different mobile markets are in different markets. In Asia, it's so varied. Honor of Kings was top in China, that's mainland China, ahead of Game for Peace. In South Korea, it was Lineage M that was number one, ahead of Whiteout Survival. In Japan, Last War Survival tops the chart ahead of Pokemon trading card game Pocket. In India, Garena Free Fire was number one ahead of PUBG Mobile. Indonesia, it was Roblox ahead of Mobile Legends. Mobile Legends Bang Bang, sorry. So it's really eclectic. It's completely different in every single market. In Europe, number one in terms of revenue was Coin Master. Yeah, that's number one in UK, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. So that's a little bit more consistent. Monopoly Go was number two in the UK and France, while Raw Match was number two in Germany and Italy, while Candy Crush Saga was number three in Spain. So a little different there, but somewhat similar across Europe. It's interesting with mobile. It's clearly a mega market. Clearly the majority of video games are going through mobile, but we are starting to see that maturity really hitting at the moment. Growth is going to come from that stronger, deeper monetization, live ops development. So we're very much at that stage. We have been for a little while now. I actually think back to our episode last week where we suggested there was no such thing as a game industry, because whenever I do something like this, I read a Sensor Tower report or read a mobilegamer.biz article, I cannot escape how different mobile is to PC and console. I know that's not a new observation, but it really is stark, I think it is. And there's a lot of data in this report from Sensor Tower. I've got it in front of me around ad trends, live ops strategy, casual versus hyper casual versus hybrid casual versus mid-core. But there's going to be an even fuller Sensor Tower gaming report coming next month. So I'm looking forward to that. It's certainly a market that's showing some maturity, but there's some interesting shifts and trends and different things in different markets. There's a lot to learn, I think. I'm going to move from the Sensor Tower report to something that's going on in PC, and specifically to Steam and around what it's doing around AI. So developers publishing on Steam don't need to disclose whether AI-powered tools such as code helpers were used in the development of its games. The firm said that tools designed to make development more efficient is not the focus of its efforts. Developers do need to disclose whether AI was used to generate content for the game. They also need to disclose whether there was AI content generated during gameplay. So that's images, words, and audio. Arc Raiders, for instance, has this sort of audio thing where the voice actors' bits merge together, and depending on the situation. So that would be part of that. Valve has required developers to disclose whether AI was used in the creation of their game since 2024 in a section on the Steam page called AI-generated content disclosure. Developers also need to describe how that AI is being used. Now, the requirement was criticised by the continually outspoken Epic boss, Tim Sweeney. He wrote on X last year, the AI tag is relevant to art exhibits for authorship disclosure and to digital content licensing marketplaces where buyers need to understand the right situation. It makes no sense for game stores where AI will be involved in nearly all future production. I'm not saying Valve listened to this, but I think, Valve does its own thing. But it does represent, I think, the journey we're all on AI. As an industry, as a society, as a world, there's obviously lots of legal and legislative things going on with this technology. But we're also finding our way collectively over what we are and aren't comfortable with, what we think is fine, what we don't think is fine. AI tools that allow us to automate and speed up certain processes. I think people are sort of broadly okay that, playing with AI to help develop ideas. People seem to be okay with that. I feel like I should be doing it more the way everyone keeps talking about it. AI doing stuff that you wouldn't necessarily have been able to do before as well, because there's certain things, like some of the stuff that Ubisoft's showing off with AI tech in their games, that's stuff you couldn't really do without AI. So sort of people seem to be getting okay with that, certain people anyway. But AI is a means to create artwork, the generative AI stuff, music, game, generative AI stuff, music, gameplay, all that kind of thing. People are not so much okay with that. And I think in that context, Steam's changes make sense. What do fans really want disclosed about this topic? Do they want to know if someone used an automated system to help them with some coding, or do they want to know if the artwork in the game is actually made by a human being? I think it's the latter rather than the former. But look, it's an ever-evolving space, AI. We're going to be talking about it a lot, actually. I went to this Epic event last week, and it was such a dominant conversation amongst just not during the event, but actually in the bars and the conversations around it. And we're going to be learning as we go with this, and we'll be talking about it as we learn those things. My final news story before we get into our main topic. It's actually a little bit of a nice one. There's a new podcast launch. I'd like to recommend it. Jude Ower, who is an industry veteran, she's worked at Playmob. She founded Playmob, in fact. She's all been about using video games to create a better world. She is helming a new Tencent-backed podcast called Good Game Club, which is launched at the Davos conference. Very fancy. As with Ower's previous work, the Good Game Club will discuss how video games can be a positive for society as a whole. It's hosted by Ower and industry commentator Matthias Gridal-Norvig. I hope I pronounced your name right, Matthias. Those two have worked together before on the 2024 book, Gaming for Good. The club's first episode features Bastian Bergman. He's a founder of technology startup Solston. I had never heard of them before. I actually met them last week. That was quite cool. Future episodes will feature Game Academy's David Barry, Us Two's Maria Sayans, a special effects chief, Dr. Mick Donegan, and Future Labs CEO Kirsty Rigdon. I think that covers most of the big stories. Now to dive into the VR sector. And to help me do that, I'm delighted to welcome investor, consultant, XR specialist, business leader, and all-round industry veteran. It is Cassia Curran. Hello, Cassia. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Hi.
It's been ages since I've spoken to you. I think you're probably with Wings at the time.
Oh, yes.
So much to catch up on, but you were just telling me just before I press record that you are working on a machine. This sounds like exactly the sort of thing I'd be obsessed with, a machine learning tool to predict game sales.
Yes, that's right.
Go on, tell me about it.
I was really early stages, so I'm mostly putting this out into the world so that if anyone else has tried something similar, and failed or is successful or anything along those lines. We'd love to hear if like just swap notes, all that sort of thing. I'm very early stages, so I'm really much in like the research and planning side and like struggling with the data. But I'll see where I get. It's just a kind of fun project and see where it leads.
Because I find the industry is incredibly hard to predict generally. Like a game genre that you think is niche suddenly becomes the biggest thing in the world, and I know it depends on the sector of the industry we're talking about, really, I guess, because mobile, it's perhaps a little bit, everything's different.
Yeah, completely so. So yeah, I've been giving talks on market analysis for years, and I will say that if this model does work, it will be bad at predicting outliers like Among Us or Blueprints. It'll be good at predicting strong contenders in established genres because everything is based upon past performance. And that's generally true of just any kind of market analysis.
Well, it is true. I often say when I'm asked to give a prediction, I said, is that with this industry, because everything changes and moves and shifts constantly.
Absolutely.
I find it's a fool's game because I base my predictions on what... I'll give you an example. When Elden Ring came out, somebody asked me on Twitter what would sell better. It came out at the same time as Horizon Forbidden West. So what's going to do better, Elden Ring or Horizon Forbidden West? So I used my data hat and I looked at Dark Souls 3, I looked at Horizon Zero Dawn, and I just went, I think they'll both do very, very well. And I should expect Elden Ring, with the George R.R. Martin thing, will have a slightly bigger launch than normal. But based on the previous data, Horizon Forbidden West, and I was incredibly wrong.
Of course. Yeah. I'm just trying to aim to make something that is as good as me or better at forecasting.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Trying to replace yourself with AI.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, why not? Why not want to
make my own machine overlord?
Yeah. How has it been? Because I think it's probably been the industry downturn and everything's happened probably since I last spoke to you. And you've got the current, I keep calling it the Cassia Games Agency. It's the current games agency.
Current games agency.
And you've been advising people. I know it's XR and VR is the big thing, which we'll come on to. But how has it been for you? Have you found the market in the last 5 years or so?
Yeah, so I've been doing fractional biz dev for lots of independent game studios. And I sort of started focusing on XR because that's where I saw a lot of funding or money for independent game studios coming in. And that gravy train now seems like it's ended.
Oh, wow.
Which is sad, but there's a lot of nuances to what's happening, I would say.
Okay.
Well, there's a lot of people going like VR is dead, or like, oh, nothing's really changed. Like it's somewhere in the middle, and also a lot of uncertainty. So,
well, let's dive into that topic then. But first, let's recap. Meta a couple of weeks ago. I've completely lost track of the time. It could have been yesterday, for all I know. But Meta's closed 3 VR studios: Twisted Pixel, who made Deadpool VR; Senzara Games, which made Asgard's Wrath; and Armature Studio, that worked on the Resident Evil 4 VR. In total, the firm is cutting 1,000 staff from its Reality Labs division and focusing its energies on AI and wearables, including augmented reality glasses. Now, since 2020, Meta's Reality Labs division has lost a lot of money, about $70 billion cumulatively. In the last quarterly earnings alone, this division lost $4.4 billion. It was expected that there may be some changes. There's always been changes going on there, but it's obviously been a major supporter of VR ever since it acquired Oculus and for $2 billion back in 2014. Its Quest line of headsets are currently the biggest products in the VR space. There are other big players in the market, but even some of them have sort of backed out, PlayStation being a big one. They were a big supporter of VR for a long time and then sort of scaled back a little bit. Valve continue to support it. They've got Steam Frame coming up and there are a few others. But from a naive outsider's perspective, Cassia, the news around with Meta feels existential. You just suggest the gravy train is ending, but there's nuances to it. So
yeah, that's right. I mean, VR is not dead. VR games are too cool to die,
right? In
my opinion. So honestly, there is like a reasonably sized core of VR gamers who are really passionate. There's also, interestingly, in like the last year and a half, a new audience segment, kind of the Roblox generation have really sort of jumped in.
Yeah.
With the Quest 3S headset was very affordable. There's data suggests that it's actually 3% of US teens own a headset. So it actually has quite deep market penetration amongst a certain age group as well. And you see that and how certain games do well, certain games haven't done well.
Yeah, okay. Because I know this because Jamie Sefton, who runs Game Republic and is a good friend of mine, he swears by VR. He's my example of someone who's really into it. So there is that audience, but I read an Upload VR piece last year which was saying that it seems like less and less money's been made. Premium games aren't doing quite as well as they used to. I've got some VGI data that says premium prices are going up. Have gone up quite a bit in the last few years as well. From the premium side of things, I know that we're talking about a shift to free to play and younger generations as well. So I'm going to focus on the older, sort of the more established VR fans. Are they as engaged as they were, do you think? Or I don't know what you base it on, but...
So I would say definitely that there has been a rise in free to play that has been pushed by this younger generation, but the sort of core VR gamers are still around, they're still engaged, but it's been harder for them to find the content that they enjoy because a lot of store space has been crowded out by Meta's Horizon Worlds.
Yeah.
There's also, I think, premium game developers have also been impacted negatively by quite a lot of piracy issues. So Quest Piracy subreddit has like 75,000 subscribers, and a lot of the premium developers are complaining about this issue. But then we see in the future Steam Frame likely to be releasing this year. That is really targeted directly at core VR gamers. I think it'll be too expensive for the younger Roblox generation alpha. And I do expect that to have like some uplift. I would say, I'm going to guess it's going to sell about 2 million headsets. But then the people who buy it will have a lot of money and be wanting to spend a lot of money on content.
Yeah.
I think that what you'll see in the premium side of things is that budgets are just going to right size themselves to the potential revenues. So I would say that there are like several top games that are premium titles that would make about between $20 to $50 million a year. And some of these titles have been relatively cheap to make. The cheapest ones, I would say, actually are more targeting the younger generation, but there are still some premium titles coming through. That having said, it's been a lot harder for premium titles to find success in the last year and a half.
It's interesting because I was looking, so VGI asked Video Game Insights into some information they've got, and they gave me the number of games released on Steam that are VR games. And 2020, that was 713. I guess they're VR tagged. And that's dropped right down to 368 in 2025. And it's just been a steady-ish drop really since that point. So we're not quite half. But is that more right sizing because of the market opportunity? I worry when we see fewer games, because games and competition is what drives innovation, which drives new users and all that kind of stuff. But it feels like we're in consolidation.
I feel like that drop on the Steam game side is more a reflection of the dominance of Meta Quest, which I would say has like between 70 to 80% of the total market revenues. And so a lot of the top titles that are free to play are actually only available on Quest, for example. I would say that there's about 1,500 non-shovelware VR titles on the Quest store, and the amount of good, decent games on the Quest has been continuing to rise. I also think that there's quite a lot of games that have been funded by Meta that are likely to be releasing this year. I think we should be thinking about 2027. Like, that's when you probably will look and be like, okay, will the number of the titles decrease? I think they will decrease potentially.
Okay. Horizon Worlds, let's talk about this then, because this is fascinating to me. This is their Roblox thing attempt basically in VR. How is that? Is that working?
No, I don't think it is working. So we've been monitoring like the user activity on that, and the indications are it's not that successful. We think that like more native applications like VR chat are more successul than Horizon Worlds, despite the amount of funding that Meta has put into it. I think that the rumors are that Horizon Worlds will be focusing on mobile only going forward and not having any VR support. And that potentially this is good news for VR developers as the store will then be cleaned up of Horizon World.
Yeah, I read that it's just flooded with Horizon Worlds games and stuff on the MetaQuest store. Yeah.
Yes, it's been very challenging. Yeah, discovery should get better, which would be really useful.
I read that Upload VR piece from a year ago, and there's been concerns around Meta's VR strategy for a while. Then this isn't a recent thing. There's been sort of shifts and changes and the focuses that have been causing problems for developers. But you think it's more linked to the stores than it is to consumer appetite for the content?
I don't think that there has been a decrease in people spending. That's what I don't think that's the case. Mm-hmm. I will say that the spending has grown in the free-to-play side significantly. And then the premium side of things has stayed steady or dropped. Actually, I would say that the top premium titles have continued to improve. And then all the premium titles below, like the top ones, have seen a massive decrease. That suggests to me it's like a real discovery issue. It's partially the stores, but it's also partially the fact that discovery is an issue for everybody.
Yeah.
And free-to-play multiplayer games kind of are better for discovery. A lot of the free-to-play games as well, they're very, very good at making shareable moments for social media or designing their games for social media as a core part of that kind of marketing discovery.
Is that what you're recommending to developers generally then? Because that's what I was going to ask, is what's your best way of getting the VR games noticed in 2026? If the stores aren't delivering for you, how do you go out there? And is that shareable stuff?
Yeah, for sure. And that goes for not just free-to-play games, but also for premium titles. I think a really interesting example is Cooking Clash VR. I don't think it's one of the most highly rated titles in terms of cooking simulators, but it's been one of the most successful. And in that particular cooking simulator, you can do things like chop up your fingers. You can take out a shotgun and shoot your cow customer, and then it turns into a steak, and you can serve the steak to its cow customer friend. There's a lot of things that are obviously make for fantastic TikToks or YouTube shorts, and can grab the eyeballs of and go viral. Yeah, and I think that's not just VR. I would say for games generally, I'm seeing more of a trend towards deliberately making parts of your game attractive on social media. And for content creators generally, just to make funny things.
You wrote in your report last year you did a report in October, which was around free to play and the shift towards free to play. But you said something that was interesting to me in that, where you said that the window for that opportunity in VR is beginning to close. Why is it beginning to close? Is it because it's becoming really competitive? What's causing that?
Just because free to play, by its nature, is the successful games are really, really good at retention, and it means that pretty quickly, these free to play games sort of suck up all those kind of players, suck up all these players, and they keep them there, and those players don't move to a new free to play game, even if the new free to play game is ostensibly better due to network effects, essentially, right? Because you've got your mates, you've invested a lot of time into it. And I saw this pattern happen in China with mobile free-to-play and PC free-to-play when it's really early stages. Seen it in the West happen with PC console free-to-play games. And so there's a reason why Fortnite continues to be on top free-to-play games, and League of Legends continue to top free-to-play games. It just happens this way, that free-to-play games, once they get established, get really hard to dislodge.
I find that interesting. I always thought VR was not the best platform for long sort of black hole style gameplay sessions. I always, maybe again, this is showing my age a little bit. For me, VR games always put it on for an hour and get on a canoe down a river or that kind of thing.
So what we find with VR is that it's really good at social stuff, because you really feel like you're present, and then if it's done well, a multiplayer game, you'll really feel like you're in a room with other people, and you're having social interactions, like you're in a party with lots of strangers, and you get to know each other. And there's activities that you can do together. You can make friends by doing these activities together. So that kind of strong social system has always been really important for successful free-to-play games, and VR provides some of the strongest social glue that in any kind of games I've seen. Yeah.
Overall, though, I'm worried about this, Cassia. If you talk about gravy train, which I'm assuming was referring to investment in VR, is drying up, and if the big tech companies that are driving VR, had been driving VR, are sort of pulling away from it, and there are fewer games being made, or potentially fewer games being made in the future, what stops this decline? What stops this sort of... It feels like circling the drain to me. That's my worry.
I don't think it's circling the drain. I think it's just more of a correction. I think that actually there's been quite a lot of waste, to be honest, in terms of funding. For example, right, big blockbuster AAA VR titles, they take several years to develop, but the VR game design is like constantly moving forward faster than the development periods of like these AAA titles can really cope with. So I give an example, like Guerrilla Tag style locomotion has really taken over for good reason, because it is really like, it's hard to start off with, I would say, but like once you get used to it, it feels really intuitive and satisfying. And every single one of the new free-to-play titles that have been successful are using this kind of Guerrilla Tag locomotion. But Deadpool VR, when the sort of game design for that was laid down, Guerrilla Tag was probably very early stages of popularity. So yeah, that's why like there's not enough maturation in terms of what works and what doesn't in terms of game design. It's a really different medium from flat games.
It's interesting. I got Steam. You've quite rightly pointed out Steam data is not the best data to judge VR from, but according to that same VGI report about the number of games released, they said only one AAA VR game came out on Steam, and it was the F1 game last year. It was tagged VR, and to be fair, there's never been that many on Steam. It was only 2 the year before, but maybe that's it's just becoming the home for indies, I guess.
Yeah, I think you'll see actually more space for indies, or I guess even like it's funny because I believe Meta's funded a lot of exclusive, like big IP related VR titles. And they've closed down a lot of these first-party studios because I guess they're not as successful as, you know, a game like UG, which is like the top number one selling game right now, earning game right now, free to play, music Guerrilla Tag locomotion. That was developed by, I think it was like 5 core developers over the space of 10 months.
Oh wow!
And it's like easily beating like Deadpool in the charts.
Yeah.
Sorry, you know, and like Deadpool was released after UG was. Yeah.
Guerrilla Tag seems to be the thing, right? It seems to be the dominant game.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. Like, there's we're still learning what works really well and what doesn't. So yeah, that's why almost like there's been a lot of like money from Meta into lots of experiments, and a lot of experiments have failed. And yeah, I think that I think the development will go back to people who to teams are really passionate about VR game development, like super passionate about what they can do. But with smaller budgets. But you don't need actually very large budgets to try something new in VR and to potentially get traction.
Are you worried that Meta's pivot around some of the news that it might impact their investment in the hardware itself? Because that's a core component of this, right?
Yeah, that is concern to me. It's nice that Steam Frame is coming out, so there is that. We have there's also various other major companies, Google, Apple, that continue along these lines, but I don't believe that Apple Vision Pro has underperformed. I think that's underperformed, contrary to the expectations. I think the Samsung Galaxy View has also underperformed compared to Google's expectations. It's kind of annoying because there is space for like a game console like VR headset to do well. I worry that Meta will no longer be subsidizing headsets like they do. So The $299 Quest 3S was really great for bringing in this huge cohort of younger audience. If they don't subsidize, what does that mean? Maybe it's a case where as that audience grows older and they still love VR and they have more disposable income, they're happy to upgrade to the next level of device. That would be the hope, but we can't be certain.
Yeah. Well, Nintendo obviously back with the Virtual Boy.
Yeah, that's right.
So maybe that's going to be the...
Yeah, I mean, it's like virtual reality games are awesome. Like, I mean, if you're into them, you're really into them, right? People do stick around as VR gamers for a long time. Like some people drop off, but like quite a lot of people really, really will continue to search for content.
I've talked about consoles on the show quite a bit because I'm into that space. And I've always said that we talk about video game consoles finding its place in the living room and what's its role with PC becoming simpler and more easy to use and mobile getting more powerful. Well, what's the role of the console? Is it fading away? And I thought, well, the thing is, consoles are supposed to be different. They're supposed to be offering experiences maybe in the living room that are different to what you can get from other devices. And I kind of think that when PlayStation backed away from VR, I thought it was a bit of a shame because that was a USP. That was different. That what made your machine slightly different to all the other machines. And I get it. You know, it's a lot of money and it probably wasn't growing to the extent they wanted it to. But it's. I think VR is one of those experiences that can be unique to anyone that sort of tries to invest in it. It's just, you know, the audience is a smaller dedicated niche. But we're in the age of dedicated niches, right? This is what the whole industry's moved towards. It's moving towards... as the industry's got so broad and there's everyone games, so we use the word gamer and really we just mean people, and everyone has different, you know, you can make a game about farming and it can be massive. You can make a game about driving buses, it can be massive because there's loads of people out driving buses. And so rant about the wider industry there than the VR.
Further to your point, I've felt for a while that like VR games feels like the early stages of like console gaming. It's kind of like this sort of somewhat niche thing that a certain group does, and outsiders don't necessarily understand. It's like, oh, you're like a console gamer, okay, you're like got like a Sega or something like that.
Yeah, almost want smaller players involved.
Yeah. So, and it's also seen as like a kid's toy as well, which like I would say some people also see VR headsets to be. So I feel there's some parallels.
Yeah,
with early consoles.
I think part of the problem then is that probably the players that were making these VR devices perhaps a bit too big. They want a certain return, and whereas someone at a smaller scale will probably be okay with what they're getting.
That is fundamentally the issue that you have to grapple with. Is that with Meta Meta's not interested in like a game console business. They're interested in like the equivalent of the smartphone business, right? The iPhone. They want to have like, they don't want the Nintendo Switch size business. They want an iPhone size business. That's what they're gunning for. Yeah. So, games is just a sort of stepping stone to get to that. It's not the reason for their existence. I would say that's Valve on the other hand, like they're so gaming focused and it's all about bringing the best games to players. That the Steam frame is kind of, we can trust that to be a games console and really target towards games. Interesting. All right. Well, yeah. Well, I'll ask one more question actually, unless there's other bits that I've missed because I almost certainly have. But what would you say to developers? You consult and you support studios, and what would you say to them in the VR, who are in the VR space today? What's your more message to them? So I would say that you have to be really passionate about making VR games to be successful, and also to take the risk. But to be honest, this is always a message just to wider game developers. I think is a really tough industry to be in because there's so much content, so much competition. In a weird way, I feel like there's going to be less competition in the VR space going forward. So you can actually, for the real like hardcore VR game developers, they're going to be all right. But dilettantes, maybe you will struggle. Well, cool. We shall follow it closely and hope that the Meta news doesn't derail anyone too much. I've actually got a chat, Cassia, in a moment with Owlchemy, Andrew Eiche. Owlchemy's coming on to
talk about they've hit a milestone. They've had 1 million people play that. I've got the name in front of me. The game they released last year, Dimensional Double Shift, and obviously Job Simulator has also just passed 6 million, which is
Job Simulator is amazing how well that continues to sell.
It's 10 years old, Cassia.
It's wild, and it's like regularly in the top selling.
Yeah,
so
10 years old.
I think it's quite a nice mix actually. If you look at the top selling charts, like of old games and new games.
I'm more concerned about how old I feel with the fact that game is 10 years old. For me, for years, whenever we had to write about the jobs market, the picture of Job Simulator was the picture that we would ever use. Well, thank you so much, Cassia, for your time. I appreciate it. And it is a tough industry. And I think VR perhaps sometimes can feel over-reliant on those big tech giants.
Yeah. I mean, like, people took the money and went for it whilst the going was good.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the right way to do it. But yeah, you just think about like why you're making games, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're passionate about making games, then by all means. But otherwise, there are so many easy ways to make money.
There is. Right. Thank you so much, Cassia. And I'll look forward to having you back on the show at some point on hopefully a more optimistic subject.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you.
I am now joined by Andrew Eiche, the CEO of Owlchemy Labs, like we did there, one of the world's top VR game developers. Hello, Andrew. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks, Christopher, for having me.
You've shared some numbers with me. Job Simulator, 6 million installs. That's nearly 10 years on the market, which makes me feel old. Still a regular in the charts, I see. And Dimensional Double Jump has hit 1 million as well.
Yeah. Dimensional Double Shift. Yeah, we have 1 million.
Shift.
Yes, it's all right.
It's written right in front of me. I have no excuse.
Yeah. Dimensional Double Shift. Yes, we've crossed 1 million players as far as our 1 million downloads on that. And yeah, we have 6 million downloads on Job Simulator. And yeah, it makes me feel old, right? I feel like we're coming up on the 10-year mark. So a decade ago, we were, in a house in Austin, Texas, in North Austin, building this game, like 10 of us, right? And yeah, if that feels like yesterday to me, but yeah, we're a decade out, and yeah, our new game, very excited and very happy with how it's doing and how it's performed thus far.
I used to work at games industry shop for a long time, and I want to thank you for creating Job Simulator, because every time we had to write anything about jobs, which we did a lot, it was the perfect image for the article.
I mean, I have to thank you for using Job Simulator, because every time you wrote something about jobs, it helped us, right? We got a little free publicity. So the only problem is when you worked on it, it was extremely difficult to talk about work, because we would have to be like, no, we're talking about the work, the job that you do. This is, versus the game, right? And so there was a lot of like, are we talking about the game right now, or are we talking about Job Simulator, the work?
Wow, yeah. Yeah, sometimes people will look at people will pitch on games and job biz as well and think that we're talking about jobs, and actually we're talking about Owlchemy.
Yeah.
So anyway, what's the secret then? How have these aren't the only two successes you've had. You've launched a number of games in between these two titles, but what's the secret to success in this space?
So in VR specifically, right? We had a theory going into this game, and that's kind of two things, right? Embodiment and social. So our secret is really embodiment. We're talking about you are the player, right? You are the character, not you're playing as someone else. And you frequently see this, the games that last a long time on the charts in XR, right? Or the games that come up and have been dominating the top of the charts. These are games that you are yourself, right? You are an embodied version of that. And then you get to express yourself. And VR being such an immersive experience, that is really important. And then on top of that, we are realizing more and more that the social aspect of VR, I mean, we kind of knew it, but like it's really strong. For a device that gets a lot of accusations of self-isolation and those kind of things, it's really the social format that drives it. And when you look at our game, right? When you look at other games in our game in the market, so when you look at like the Gorilla Tags or Uggs, who are these extremely popular games, Animal Company, in our game, we have these similarities, right? And so it's the locomotion that helps, the kind of ways that these games do that has a specific way it cut it out. But at their core, these are games about like social style play, right? Large games of tag. And in our game, it's about like kind of being in those mini cities. If you have kids, right, they always have these like indoor play parks that look like a little city, and you pretend to be a fireman, or you pretend to be a cook, or you pretend to work at a grocery store or a TV anchor. And so a lot of that kind of play is what works really well, and that's that embodied play. It's kind of the original role playing, right? And what attracts people to role playing games isn't always the like throwing out fistfuls of dice, getting stats back. It's the I'm going to pretend to be something that either I'm not, or I'm going to pretend to be like a characterized version of myself. And so when we had this theory and we built it and we put it out there, and it when we did the beta, we were like, okay, really, really healthy beta for us will be if we could get 20,000 downloads in 6 months, and we got 200,000 downloads in 2 months. So we were like, okay, clearly we've hit something. And then I think the other thing too is there's a space for that kind of like tight cooperative play, and you see this in regular games, right? The friend slop genre, so to speak, is people want collaborative, cooperative play where they're given broad sets of freedom, and in VR it's even more so.
Creating something that people want is one thing, but even getting discovered on VR, I understand is getting particularly challenging. And obviously, I think that it's interesting, the free to play, the movement and the sort of younger people, that generation coming in, how that shifted things, which we can talk about in a second. But how have you cracked that, or is it a bit of luck?
I mean, there's always a lot of luck in these things, right? It's the secret is, right, if we knew what was popular, we could manufacture entertainment in a way that we don't. So there is a bit of luck involved. There's a bit of where, riding in the wake of our prior success, we get to put in the front of every trailer from the makers of Job Simulator, and that definitely helps. And then there's a bit of like, there's a lot of understanding. And I don't know how far down the rabbit hole you want to go, but I could easily like talk breathlessly for an hour about customizing the product description page. And like the long story short there is there are so many elements in the way that platforms allow you to present yourself, and so many little spaces, and using those correctly is extremely important. So for those folks that are listening and make games, right? A lot, if not the majority of your players are going to encounter the moment of buying the game when they're actually in the store, especially on XR, right? You're not, we get a lot of people who buy from their phones, but a lot of times they're in the headset and they see the store and they buy the game. And so you do a lot of upfront communication with a very boring and seemingly throwaway thing, the product description page, but like every element on that matters. And then on top of that, it's just being creative and creating games that show well. And you got to think about, how they screenshot. We have this very unique and very fun, bright art style that stands out. So yeah, it's like we do the best to set ourselves up for success, get ourselves as close as we can without using luck. And then we threw it out, and our timing couldn't have been more perfect. The Metastore switched to a model that better supported free-to-play at the time that we launched a free-to-play game. And so that also helped us.
Because it's free-to-play, and I was seeing this trend around, we had someone on the show, Cassia was on the show earlier, Cassia Curran was on the show earlier, talking about younger people coming in, the sort of that Roblox generation. Have you seen that with your game? Is it a different audience on Dimensional Double Shift, I said it again, compared to Job Simulator?
Our audience always trends young, is what it turns out. How do I put this? So like, yeah. So in we have a broad audience, right? We have a pretty, like, if you look at like our YouTube statistics and stuff, right? It's like a flat bar of ages, which is really interesting and very odd. But if you look at who plays our games repeatedly, right? So adults will play our game. They'll play our game once or twice. They'll really love it, right? But younger, right? On the younger side of things, the kids will play our games obsessively. And the way I describe it is like, imagine if you had a Fisher-Price kitchen that worked, right? In Fisher-Price kitchen, you have to imagine the stuff lights on fire. In Job Simulator, it lights on fire. You could pour liquid. You could do all the little bits. And so this game actually trends a little bit older because of the multiplayer aspect. Our other game, we had to like approve it for like the 10-year-olds, which is the lowest, youngest category that Meta allows. Just because, you know, I take so many pictures at conventions with people who are like, my kids are going to go nuts, right? And my parents, and so, and even we saw a version of like, there was like House Hunters International, and they're like, I don't know what my kid's doing. He's playing this job game in the background, right? And so it's just something where like the adults, they play it, they get it, they really enjoy it, much like adults consume media, right? You kind of watch your show and then you're done. And then it's the kids that come back time and time again. And so a lot of our community, you know, is like between about 13, 25 is what we're finding for Dimensional Double Shift.
Andrew, I've got to ask you about what's happened at Meta over the last couple of weeks with their cuts.
Of course.
What's your take on that? Is that concerning to you from somebody in the VR business?
In the short term, it's concerning to me. On the long term, less so. There's a bunch of like interesting devices and form factors coming down the pipeline. But the problem is we have to survive the short term to get to the long term. The cuts are concerning because, you know, there's an argument to be made that like, oh, you know, we had to compete against first party studios, right? And there is some truth to that. And there is some truth to saying like getting rid of the first party studios removes some of the competitive barrier where Meta was incentivized, right? They would be incentivized to promote Deadpool or Batman or Asgard's Wrath more than Job Simulator or Dimensional Double Shift. But then like counter to that, right, is you have, you know, they never even gave these studios a chance to like spin out. I don't know the internals, but they didn't give a chance for them to spin out or survive. So you're taking a large set of knowledge that existed across, you know, XR, and then we're potentially losing it, right? Because like we don't have, I wish I could hire outright, you know, Twisted Pixel and just be like, oh yeah, you still exist, but I don't have the ability to wave a magic wand and do that. And a lot of those people are probably going to leave and not come back. So the space that it worries me is like, are we ending up reset? And I think the thing that like frustrates me the most, right, is like, I understood Meta's strategy with these studios at the start, right? Like, okay, use these studios to secure very large IPs like Deadpool or Batman, and then use that as like a kind of loss leader to be like, hey, you like Batman, the next Batman Arkham game that you really love is on this headset, so you need to buy this headset, right? That's a coherent strategy. But when you stop launching headsets, which they haven't launched a new headset with like a real revision, right? They launched the Quest 3S, but they have not launched a Quest 4 that has a new chip. So they've been on the same chip, same general hardware specs since 2023. And it's 2026 now, right? It's like, what's the strategy here? And then they're pushing these studios to continue the same type of work when they themselves have all the data that says that like the industry is swinging towards this kind of free to play, or these very specific, more live games that constantly update are what, you know, their player base likes. And so I think the thing that's the kind of things that are concerning to me is like, we had a company subsidize and follow a path that they likely knew was a dead end, that we likely knew was that we at Owlchemy, we realized it was a dead end, and that's why we switched, right? Cosmonious High did okay, but it didn't do well enough that we could believe that we could sustainably continue making that game. And they just kind of plowed forward. And so it's like, it like makes you question. It's like, what are you doing overall with this, right? And then how much money is like, you could say that we're not competing with, you know, the Batmans or whatever, but we're still competing with Meta Horizon. If you've been in that space, the Meta Horizon content is shown at an equivalent level to the game content. So you can have a creator, that's dropping millions of dollars to make a video game. And when somebody searches their video game, if you search Job Simulator, you'll see Job Simulator at the top, and then you'll see a bunch of Meta Horizon worlds, which are free, right? And make it very difficult for me to say you should spend $19.99 to buy our game when there's like 5 that you hit free. And by the time you hit free, you forget you were going to buy a game. That like moment to think of the purchase is fleeting, right? And so it's just not... I'm struggling to understand the strategy here overall with Meta. And so it's great to see that we're starting to get competition, our parent company doing Android XR, the Steam Frame coming down the line, and those, because we've kind of been all our chips in one basket as an industry. And if that company decides that they're done, then we're in a bad spot. And kind of the last point, because I've now been just rambling for a while.
No, it's great.
Is like Meta's goals are not like Meta, the large company, not the XR company. Their goals are not aligned with the XR industry. I don't mean that negatively or positively. It's just like kind of a fact, right? It's like Meta wants to build social platforms, and they want to build, and so like there's a parallel there, but their goal is not to make XR as great as it could possibly be. Their goal is not to make the best industry. Their goal is to make social platforms, and their goal is to do this in whatever way they can. And so if suddenly the investment in shifts to AI, XR hurts. And if they are the only game in town that's making any real money, they kind of control the fate of all these developers. So hoping that's why the long term is brighter, because there is like legitimate competition coming into the industry, but we all kind of have to make it through 2026 first.
Yeah. So I think Cassia was saying that, Meta was, subsidizing some of those headsets, releasing them in a more affordable way. And will they continue to do that going forward if this isn't a focus for them anymore? Was one of her concerns.
All the tech CEOs have to answer the same exact question every day from their investors, right? Why should I send $1 to your gaming division when that dollar could go to your AI division? And if AI does what you've all promised it says it should do, I should get $1,000 for the $1 I give you. So that's the thing, is like they're staring down that kind of decision making process. So when it comes to like, hey, we're subsidizing the headsets, the investors and the board are going to be asking, Mark, like, why are you spending all this money on this thing when you could be reinvesting it in artificial intelligence?
You're technically part of one of those organizations as well, right?
I am. Yeah, we are a wholly owned subsidiary of Google. So.
Which for quite a while now. 9 years nearly? Is it 9 years?
8 years, yeah. 8
years, wow. I know people that really love VR games, and it's like, I know that it's maybe not be the biggest segment of the video game space, but there is a active audience here, and where you can build a sustainable business. I mean, you've proven that with the success of your games. But when you see something like this happen for Meta, that's got to affect investment. That's going to affect studios that might be interested in getting in this space. You talk about those first-party studios making it less competitive, but actually competition is a good thing when you're trying to grow a segment, right?
Of course, yeah.
I don't really have a point to that. Well,
I actually was just making Meta's framing. I actually don't feel like the first parties were truly competitive against us. I never felt like Batman was taking away from Job Simulator sales. I do start to get worried that Horizon is taking attention away. So I'm not sure I buy their argument. That's just the argument that they're kind of making in the background, is like, oh, well, you don't have to compete against Asgard's Wrath. And I was like, I was never really worried about competing against Asgard's Wrath, but I am worried about competing against like Job Simulator, the virtual world, and Horizon.
Yeah, well, it doesn't sound like Horizon's doing particularly great either, in terms of where they want to take it and what they're hoping to do with it. We don't obviously have any accurate numbers. It seems to be in the charts, but yeah. I'll ask one more question, Andrew, because I'm conscious of the time, and I know that we're here really to talk about the success of your games. But
I expected to talk about the whole industry, right? Because
we can talk about the whole industry. It's
like, yeah. I mean, how much could you say? Yeah, we sold a lot of job sim. Which is great, and we're super happy about it.
Yeah, but those numbers aren't small numbers, right? You're not talking about. People often think VR as being, and it is a smaller industry, the rest of it, but you can sell 6 million, okay, over 10 years, but it's 6 million. And you're able to then pivot, and you're seeing the free-to-play model, you're able to move to that, and you're seeing success in that space. It suggests that there is an industry here. It's just whether or not Meta's move is going to impact the growth of that in the short term rather than the popularity of it.
And if you talk to Cassia, she probably knows the industry well too, but the industry right now is primarily young and old in terms of who's buying, right? There's a lot of people who you'll see the statistics. They'll say 30-year-olds are buying headsets and 40-year-olds, right? But like, they could be parents, right? Or they could be buying for someone else. But what we see in terms of like who's actually playing is like Gen Alpha is a VR native generation. They don't think it'll go away. They don't care that it'll go away. VR is to them what tablets were to Gen Z and what laptops were to millennials, right? And cell phones. It's a part of their daily lives, and they fully expect it. So when you talk about like, is it a small industry? Yeah, it's small like it was, in the early 80s for gaming, right? You had the people who had the games, the people who kind of go to their friend's house and play it, and you see a lot of similarities between kind of the industry in parallel there. So, as these kids grow older, it's going to expand.
Yeah, Cassia was talking about it, comparing it to consoles in the sense that, it's like the early stage of the console market where there was people that were doing it, but it wasn't, and it sort of grew from there. It's interesting. When anyone's sort of anyone in the industry looking to sort of at the VR market right now, should they be considering it? Is it? What advice would you give to them?
My advice is look at the top titles and look at what they're doing and how they're doing development, right? So I think that there is still a lot of success to be had, however you define that success, right? Whether it's financial or it's in players or I think there's a lot of success to be had. But what you can't do is say, I want to make this very specific type of game and I want it to exist in VR. We don't have the luxury in VR right now of player base, which is exactly what we've been talking about, where you can target a niche, right? I hope someday we could target a niche. I think that's wonderful. But right now you have to kind of target the broad strokes of what VR players like. And what they like right now is embodied social games that update very frequently. Some of the games update way more. Like we make sure that we put out an update once a month, and we're on the slow side. There are games that are updating weekly, and the way they get away with it is they do the jank thing, right? Like Gorilla Tag and Animal Company are famously janky, so that way when they put out these updates, if it kind of breaks, the community is like, it's not like, I get it. Like the art style isn't communicating to me that this is like AAA quality stuff, but it's what the current industry likes. So that's what you really have to look at. And then I think there's innovation to be had on top of that, right? If you want to make a quick buck, you make a arm swinger Gorilla Tag clone and see how far you can get. And a lot of young people are doing that in small studios. I think you could look at our success as hey, take a step back, take a broader look at what people like, not just at a pure like nitty gritty mechanics level, but more philosophical level, and then see if there's an untapped group and go from there. We get a lot of families. We're one of the few games that families can play together, right? And so we get a lot of parents bought a Quest 3, give the kids the Quest 2, and then when they want to game together, they play our game.
Andrew, I could talk to you for absolutely ages. I think about the sector, and something that clearly you've, after more than a decade working in it, you clearly have an understanding of it, and I do hope that the stuff that's going on with what's happened at Meta, and obviously before that PlayStation, obviously they sort of scaled back as well. Doesn't hold it back, because I always think it's one of those industries that's everyone thought it was going to change the world, and then it's just but it existed. It did emerge as a viable thing, and I hope it can continue to grow even in spite of, you're right. You don't want to be reliant on these big tech companies. You don't. Yeah. You want it to be able to stand on its own 2 feet as an industry. It's getting there, I guess. I
think the thing is, had it followed the path that you kind of laid out of, it showed up on the scene, it wrecking balled, and it changed the world, which cell phones didn't even do. And I think we use cell phones as the example, but we're back in Palm Pilot era right now of VR headsets. We're figuring it out. We still have clunky devices that are a little bit embarrassing to wear, that are hot and heavy, and we're moving in a better direction. And so I'm actually quite pleased that the industry is taking its time. I know that doesn't please tech investors who want the hockey stick. They always talk about the hockey stick growth, but at the same time, right, building this and understanding it and growing it is going to make a healthier, more sustainable industry in the long run, as long as we can all agree that it's worth existing at a kind of core human level. And I think that we've found some agreement on that. Brilliant. Well, thank you, Andrew. That's a good note to lead it on. Thank you for your time. Yeah, thanks for having me. You know where to find me. Happy to talk anytime. So. Well, great. Good to know. Right, that's it for today's episode of The Game Business Show. We'll be back with more news, insight, analysis, and interviews in the days to come. If you want to make sure you don't miss a thing, do sign up at thegamebusiness.com. Until next time, thank you for tuning in.